It started with 5 words: outrun me with that junk car. A challenge that turned into a $220 million mistake. Preston Whitmore III was the very picture of success. A CEO, a millionaire, and a member of Scottsdale's most exclusive country club. One afternoon in March, he pulled his white Lamborghini up beside a 1972 Chevrolet Camaro at a stoplight. The car's paint was faded and its chrome was dull. All Preston saw was a piece of junk. He actually got out of his car, circled the Camaro, then looked at the black man in the driver's seat and laughed. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "This isn't really your kind of neighborhood." "I'll tell you what," he said. "Outrun me with that junk car. I dare you." Then he wagered his entire company. He lost that race by 14 seconds. He lost his company 90 days later, all because the black driver he underestimated was far from a nobody. Preston Whitmore judged a man by the age of his car and the color of his skin and decided he was superior. He was dead wrong, and that mistake cost him everything. You'll want to stay until the end. You're going to want to see who is actually behind that wheel. It's 6 o'clock in the morning in Scottsdale, Arizona. The cool of the desert night still hangs in the air. From somewhere in the mesquite trees, a mockingbird begins to sing. The sky is slowly shifting from black to purple, with the very first hints of orange on the horizon. Inside his garage, Malcolm Travers is standing by his car. The concrete floor beneath his feet is spotless. He mopped it yesterday, just like he does every Sunday. On the pegboard walls, his tools hang in perfect order, with each one's outline traced in black marker so he can tell in an instant if a single thing is out of place. His father taught him that order creates clarity, and clarity creates speed. And there, in the center of the garage, lit by a single overhead bulb, sits the car, a 1972 Chevrolet Camaro SS, with black paint that had clearly seen better decades. It was faded in some spots, touched up in others with a shade that never quite matched. The brown leather interior was a mix of deep cracks and soft, worn-in comfort. Most people would look at it and call it a project, a relic, or just plain junk. Malcolm runs his hand along the curve of the hood. The metal feels cool against his skin. He knows every line, every single imperfection, and every story this car holds. He knows the small dent near the passenger side mirror, from when his father bumped a shopping cart back in 1986. He knows the scratch on the rear quarter panel, a scar from a branch that fell during a monsoon in 1994. He knows the replacement taillight housing doesn't quite match the other one. The original was shattered by a rock that got kicked up on the highway back in 2003. The car had belonged to his father, Samuel Travers, a mechanic who routinely worked 60-hour weeks and never once complained about it. He was the man who taught Malcolm everything there was to know about engines, long before Malcolm ever even sat in a race car. Samuel passed on in 2019. The cancer was swift and merciless. It was only 11 weeks from diagnosis to the funeral. Malcolm kept the car exactly the way his father had left it. The exterior, that is. Under the hood was an entirely different story. A 454 cubic inch V8 rebuilt and tuned to a specification that would make most engineers weep with respect. It was packed with forged internals and a custom camshaft, along with headers Malcolm had fabricated himself in a friend's machine shop. But to anyone looking at it, it was just a 52-year-old American muscle car that had seen better days. You won't find any trophies in Malcolm's house. There are no championship rings on display, no framed photos of celebrations on a podium. If you were to walk through his living room, all you would see is comfortable furniture, a modest television, and bookshelves packed with engineering manuals and biographies of jazz legends. You would never in a million years guess that the man who lives here once stood at the absolute pinnacle of motorsport. 3 Formula One World Championships, 1998, 2001, and 2003, with 41 Grand Prix victories. His career made him an absolute legend in Europe, and little more than a footnote in America, where open-wheel racing never really captured the public's imagination. Malcolm retired in 2005 at just 33 years old. He walked away from the sport at his absolute peak, which is incredibly rare. He did it quietly, which is even rarer. There was no farewell tour, no teary-eyed press conferences, just a simple statement. I came to race. I raced. Now I'm done. These days, he runs a nonprofit called the Travers Racing Academy. He's had 142 graduates so far. All of them are kids from tough neighborhoods, kids who remind Malcolm of himself at that age. Hungry, talented, and completely overlooked. They're the kind of kids whose guidance counselors told them they would never amount to anything. He teaches them how to drive, but more importantly, he teaches them discipline, focus, and the hard truth that excellence requires patience. His father's words still echo in his mind every single morning. Don't explain who you are, let them see. And there was another phrase, one that Malcolm has carried with him like a compass through every victory and every loss. Always finish what you start. Malcolm opens the driver's side door. The hinges let out a faint creak. He could fix it, of course, but he actually likes the sound. The leather seat gives way with a familiar softness as he settles in. He reaches up and taps the dash cam mounted to the windshield. A small red light begins to blink. He always has the dash cam running. It's a deeply ingrained habit from his racing days, when every bit of footage could be the difference between a penalty and a clean record. You never know when you'll need the footage, he once said to a student. A chuckle escaped the student. Malcolm remained impassive as the engine roared to life. A deep V8 growl flooded the garage, its vibrations coursing up the steering column and lodging in Malcolm's chest like a secondary pulse. He eased the car onto the sleeping street as the dawn began to slash the eastern horizon with streaks of orange and pink, heralding the heat to come. The day held a familiar list of tasks: parts to acquire, errands to complete, and paperwork to file at the academy. The mundane gears of a conventional life. He followed his standard path, a journey that took him past the usual landscape of strip malls, fuel stations, manicured golf courses, and exclusive enclaves. His route concluded at the entrance to Ridgerest Country Club, where a wrought iron barrier and a guardhouse starkly divided the members from the rest of the world. That gate had been a fixture of his daily drive hundreds of times, a landmark he'd never once paused to consider. But this day would be different. March 12th, 2024. At 2:52 p.m., the Arizona sun hammered the asphalt without mercy. Shimmering waves of heat rose from the tarmac like transparent veils, while the gauge on the dashboard registered 93 degrees. Malcolm idled at a stoplight, the grand entrance to the Ridgerest Country Club positioned a mere 20 feet to his right. The guardhouse was now occupied. A man in a khaki uniform sat inside, his focus lost in the glow of his phone. The imposing wrought iron gate stood shut, its elaborate metalwork casting a complex web of shadows on the sun-bleached pavement. A brilliant white Lamborghini Huracan slid into the lane beside him, its engine emitting a sharp, high-pitched wail, an Italian shriek against the Camaro's guttural American growl. The license plate announced Finage 1, and its chrome wheels gleamed in the intense light. The car's paint was so starkly white it was almost painful to view in the direct sunlight. An electronic whir signaled the descent of the driver's window, revealing a man in his late 40s. He sported a polo shirt with a popped collar and designer sunglasses that likely exceeded the cost of Malcolm's monthly food budget. His was the kind of artificial tan acquired on golf links and yacht decks, not from actual labor beneath the sun. Preston Whitmore III. His eyes landed on the Camaro, his expression transitioning from curiosity to amusement, before settling into something that was unmistakably contempt. The entire shift in his demeanor took less than 3 seconds. "What on earth is this thing?" Preston shouted over. His tone was saturated with that unique blend of privilege and disdain that Malcolm had encountered in various cities across different decades. "Did you haul that out of a scrap heap?" Malcolm kept his gaze locked forward, his hands resting calmly on the wheel at 10 and 2. The steady red blink of the dash cam pulsed in his peripheral vision. Preston pushed his door open, setting foot on the blistering asphalt. The sound of his loafers, likely hand-stitched Italian leather, clicked sharply against the pavement. He rounded the front of his Lamborghini and began to prowl around the Camaro, circling it like a predator sizing up its prey. He rapped his knuckles on the hood. The resulting sound was hollow and metallic. Seriously, does this wreck even run, or do you just push it around as some kind of ornament? Malcolm said nothing, having learned over 52 years that silence is often the most potent reply. Preston bent down, his face appearing in the open window, preceded by an aggressive cloud of expensive, masculine cologne. His smile was that of a person who had never been refused, never been denied entry, never been told the word no in his entire life. What are you even doing in this part of town? This isn't exactly your typical stomping ground. The light stubbornly remained red. In his mind, Malcolm counted the seconds. He'd faced this kind of challenge before. The locations and faces changed, but the presumptions were always the same. The belief that the vehicle was the full measure of the man. The false equivalence of appearance with capability. The notion that personal wealth defined a person's worth. Straightening up, Preston pointed a thick, manicured finger at Malcolm, a gold ring bearing a family crest flashing on it. I'll make you a deal. Try to outrun me in that clunker. I dare you. First one to the 15 junction. If you actually win, I'll hand you $50,000 in cash, right here. No questions asked. Malcolm finally turned his head, locking eyes with Preston and studying the pure arrogance and total certainty etched into his features. And what happens when you win? Malcolm asked. Then you are never to drive through this neighborhood again. You'll take your junker and you will disappear, Preston declared with a grin that showcased a fortune in orthodontic work. Is it a deal? Make the stakes more interesting. Preston's self-assured grin faltered for a heartbeat. $50,000 isn't interesting enough for you? Your company. And with that, the grin completely vanished. Preston could only stare. My company? FinEdge? You want to put up $220 million against this? With a sweeping motion of utter disbelief, he gestured at the Camaro. This bucket of bolts? You're the one who called it junk, Malcolm stated flatly. Malcolm's voice was even and calm, the sound of a man who had faced down opponents at 200 miles per hour. It should be easy money for you. A flicker ignited in Preston's eyes. It was pride. It was ego. It was the absolute conviction of a man who had never lost anything that truly mattered. It was the self-assurance that comes from a lifetime of victory, where the very concept of losing was never an option. Fine, Preston conceded, leaning in so close his voice dropped to a near whisper, a strange and sudden intimacy between them. You think you can take my company? Beat me in that piece of junk, and FinEdge Corp is all yours. Every last share. But the moment you lose, and you will, I get the keys to that heap, and you disappear for good. We have a deal? Deal. Preston shot his hand out. Malcolm just stared at it, unmoving. I don't shake on wagers, Malcolm said flatly. I settle them. From inside the guard shack at Ridgerest Country Club, a security man named James Holloway watched it all. After 7 years on the job, he'd seen Preston Whitmore pull this exact stunt before. The taunts, the swagger, the whole alpha dog display. It was always aimed at the same kind of person, delivered with that signature, effortless cruelty. James just shook his head, a slow, weary motion. He had no idea who this guy in the Camaro was, but there was something in his posture, a quiet calm, a total absence of fear. James had a gut feeling that Preston Whitmore had finally chosen the wrong fight. The light went green. 2 engines screamed to life. The course was straightforward, a 2.3-mile run to the Highway 15 junction. 2 straights, a couple of bends, and barely any traffic this late. They'd have to weave around a handful of cars, but it was nothing serious. Green light. Preston blasted off the line. The Lamborghini's all-wheel drive system engaged perfectly, dumping 610 horsepower onto the asphalt with clinical efficiency. The tires let out a single chirp before biting down hard. 0 to 60 in a blistering 2.9 seconds. The G-force shoved Preston deep into his leather seat. A quick glance in the rearview mirror showed the Camaro already shrinking, a distant speck in his dust. He smirked, the taste of victory already on his tongue. Child's play. Except Malcolm wasn't even racing. Not yet. He was waiting, absorbing the road through the wheel, the seat, the pedals, listening to the engine's soul, and reading the blacktop ahead. In Formula One, the launch is crucial. Everything that comes after defines the champion. The first corner approached, a gentle right-hander, maybe 30 degrees. This was the kind of turn that separates the amateurs from the professionals. Amateurs see a bend. Pros see an opening. Preston dove in hot and braked late, far later than necessary, purely to show off. Though no one could see him, he felt the Lamborghini's sophisticated computer managing the weight shift, keeping the car glued to the road despite his aggressive steering. Malcolm entered even faster. He had no traction control, no stability systems, no electronic safety nets of any kind. It was just one man, one machine, and 30,000 hours of instinct forged on the world's most brutal racetracks. He kissed the apex with absolute perfection, the Camaro's rear end stepping out just a hair before snapping back into line. He didn't lose a fraction of his speed. His line was something out of a textbook, or rather, the kind of line textbooks wish they could properly explain. Preston had just lost 0.4 of a second. He didn't know it yet. The first straightaway opened up, and the Camaro's V8 roared with it, its tone dropping into a deeper, angrier bellow. It was a mechanical thunder that seemed to erupt from the earth itself. This was not the sound of some clunker. This was the sound of raw American muscle, unleashed. Preston checked his mirror. His smile vanished. The Camaro was closing in. Impossible. That heap of junk couldn't possibly be gaining on a Lamborghini Huracan. And yet, there it was. Malcolm's foot was welded to the floorboard. His hands were fused to the steering wheel. His eyes were locked on the road far ahead, already plotting the next corner, calculating the required speed, angle, and grip. This wasn't a street race to him. This was nothing. A lazy Sunday drive compared to the wars he had waged. He'd battled at Monaco, where the margin for error is measured in millimeters, and one blink means intimate contact with a concrete wall. He dueled at Spa, where a downpour turns the track into a black mirror, separating the truly brave from the merely skilled. He'd fought wheel to wheel against the greatest drivers on earth at 200 miles per hour while millions watched. Preston Whitmore wasn't in the same league. Preston Whitmore wasn't in any league that mattered. The second corner, a tighter 45-degree left, was coming up. This one demanded sheer nerve. This one was the great divider between those who trust their skill and those who just cling to hope. Preston braked too early, a cold spike of fear finally piercing his calculations. Some primal part of his brain knew what his conscious mind refused to admit. He was being hunted. Malcolm, on the other hand, didn't brake at all. He just feathered the gas, rotated the car on its own weight, and shot out of the turn with the Camaro's nose aimed like a weapon at Preston's rear bumper. The maneuver was so impossibly smooth, so utterly effortless, it looked as if the car were possessed. It wasn't. Malcolm was just that good. Now they were side by side, the guttural rumble of the V8 clashing with the high-pitched scream of the V10. American muscle versus Italian engineering. Raw experience versus cutting-edge equipment. A warrior versus a rich man in a fast car. Preston glanced left. For the first time, he got a clear look at Malcolm's face. It was calm, focused, and bordering on bored. It was the face of a man who had performed this ritual so many times it had become a simple act of breathing. Model. With the junction just 500 meters down the final stretch of road, Preston slammed the accelerator to the floor, and the Lamborghini shrieked as it launched forward. Every one of its 610 horses strained against the unyielding forces of gravity and air. But the Camaro's roar was somehow even louder. Malcolm blew past Preston as if the Lamborghini were standing still, creating a gap of one car length, then two, then 3, then 4. By the time they blasted past the junction, Malcolm was so far ahead he could afford to decelerate, guide the car onto the shoulder, kill the engine, and step outside before Preston's supercar even crossed the imaginary finish line. 14 seconds. It wasn't just a lead, it was a chasm, an impossible canyon of time that no amount of raw horsepower could ever hope to close. Preston finally pulled in behind the Camaro. A tremor ran through his hands as they gripped the steering wheel, and his face was flushed crimson, not from the effort of the race, but from something else entirely. It was a cocktail of disbelief, white-hot rage, and pure humiliation. He was drowning in the unfamiliar feeling of being thoroughly and devastatingly outmatched as he climbed out of the Lamborghini. His legs felt weak beneath him. He made his way toward the Camaro, where Malcolm was waiting, leaning casually against the driver's side door with his arms crossed. "You cheated," Preston's voice cracked. "There's just no way that piece of junk beat me honestly. It has to be modified, probably illegal." "This doesn't count," he insisted. "I demand a rematch." Malcolm's response was quiet, but its firmness cut through the air. The bet was outrun me with that junk car, not best 2 out of 3. You laid down the terms. I met them. "A deal's a deal," Malcolm stated, his voice calm but unyielding. Preston stood there under the blazing Arizona sun, sweat glistening on his brow, his $300,000 Lamborghini ticking as it cooled behind him. He'd never lost a wager in his life. He'd certainly never been defeated so decisively. He had never felt so utterly insignificant. "Look," he began, struggling to pull his shattered composure back together. "That was just a joke, a figure of speech. Nobody could have actually expected." "Your exact words were, and I have them recorded," Malcolm interrupted. "Outrun me with that junk car, and I'll sign over every single share of Finage Corp." Malcolm's tone didn't waver for a second. "I have it all on video. Every word. That's a verbal contract." "You can't be serious," Preston scoffed. "You honestly think any judge in this country would enforce a ridiculous bet made between 2 strangers on the side of a highway?" "I think a judge would watch the recording," Malcolm replied evenly. "I think they would hear you state the terms, twice, for good measure. And then I think they would politely ask you to make good on your word." With that, the last of Preston's composure shattered completely. His features contorted into a mask of something truly ugly. Not just anger anymore, but a raw, primal fear. It was the kind of terror that grips you when you realize your own arrogance has written a check that your entire fortune can't cash. "Who in the hell do you think you are? Do you have any idea who I am? I am Preston Whitmore. I built FinEdge from absolutely nothing. I'm responsible for 400 employees. I serve on 3 different boards. I play golf with senators," he spat. "You're a nobody. You're just some random guy in a clunker." Through it all, Malcolm didn't move a muscle. His arms stayed crossed. His expression remained a placid mask. "I'm the guy who just left you in the dust by 14 seconds, he said. "And I'm also the guy who is about to own your company." Preston's hands shot to his pocket, fumbling for his phone. His fingers trembled uncontrollably as he punched in 3 numbers. "I need police right away," he said into the phone. "At the entrance to Ridgerest Country Club off Highway 15. There's a black male here who is threatening me, trying to extort me. He's demanding I give him my company. Yes, I can hold." The accusations hung thick and poisonous in the dry desert air. Malcolm had heard this story before, different versions in different places over the years, but always featuring the same casual, desperate weaponization of fear. He remained perfectly still. He didn't raise his voice. He refused to give Preston the satisfying reaction he was so clearly hoping for. He simply waited. 8 minutes later, a pair of Scottsdale police cruisers arrived, their lights painting the scene in flashes of red and blue. Officer Daniel Perry emerged from the first car. At 29 years old, he was still fairly new to the force and moved with the measured professionalism of someone who was still getting used to the authority his badge represented. Preston was already launching into his story before Perry could even get to them. The words spilled out in a torrent of indignant fury. "Officer, thank God. This man is trying to steal my entire company. He's completely delusional, and I think he's dangerous. I have no idea what he's on, but he's making all kinds of threats. You need to arrest him." Perry simply held up a hand to silence him, then turned his attention to Malcolm. The red light of the body camera on his chest was clearly visible. "Sir," he said calmly, "can you tell me your side of what's going on here?" "This gentleman wagered his company stock against my car in a race," Malcolm explained. His voice was perfectly level and matter-of-fact, completely devoid of emotion. "He lost the race. I am now asking that he honor our agreement. I have the entire incident, including our conversation and the race itself, on my dash cam." Officer Perry's eyebrows lifted just a fraction. "May I see that footage?" he asked. Malcolm gave a slight nod. He took his phone from his pocket, connected it to the dash cam's local Wi-Fi, and brought up the video file before handing the device over to the officer. Perry watched the video without a word. He listened as Preston walked around the Camaro, disdainfully calling it a piece of junk. He listened as Preston boastfully issued the challenge. He heard the figure, $220 million. He heard the specific terms, every single share of Finage Corp. Then he watched as Malcolm's car didn't just win the race, but utterly annihilated the Lamborghini, leaving it behind as if it had been chained to a post. When the footage ended, Perry looked up from the phone, first at Malcolm, and then he took a long, hard look at the Camaro. A real look this time. With a practiced motion, he draws his own phone, and his thumbs begin to fly across the screen, running the plates, and the database responds almost instantly. The vehicle is registered to the Travers Racing Academy, its history marked for competition use only, under the Formula One racing classification. Perry's fingers tap again, this time into a Google search for Malcolm Travers, and the screen immediately fills with results. A younger Malcolm fills the screen in a collage of images from podiums across the globe, spraying champagne under perfect blue skies, with trophies held high in moments of pure victory. Headlines from sports pages all over Europe jump out at him. Travers secures his third world title, and the silent champion reigns supreme once more. Malcolm Travers, the single greatest American to ever compete in Formula One history. Perry slowly lowers his phone. The mask of professional indifference he wore just moments ago has utterly vanished, replaced by something entirely different. It's a look of pure recognition, of deep respect, followed by the slow dawning realization that this routine traffic stop just became anything but. He clears his throat and speaks carefully. "Sir, are you by any chance Malcolm Travers, the Formula One driver?" "Former," Malcolm corrects gently. "I hung it up back in 2005. "A three-time world champion," Perry breathes, almost to himself, and physically takes a step back. "My dad took me to see the Phoenix Grand Prix back in '99. I was just 11 years old, and I watched you win that day. I kept your poster on my bedroom wall for years. You were the whole reason I—" He cuts himself off, professionalism snapping back into place. "I apologize. That has no bearing on the situation." "It's all right, officer," Malcolm says, while Preston listens in, his confusion visibly mounting. "What in the world are you two talking about? Formula One? Him?" He jabs a finger at Malcolm, his expression a mix of disbelief and sheer desperation. "That's ridiculous. The man was driving that clunker. Champions don't drive junk." Officer Perry turns his attention to Preston, his voice now perfectly level and professional. But a distinct change has occurred in his gaze. The automatic deference men like Preston Whitmore expect as their birthright is conspicuously gone. "Mr. Whitmore, this man is Malcolm Travers. He's a three-time Formula One world champion. To put that in perspective, it's like winning the Super Bowl 3 times in a row, only for a sport that is infinitely more complex from a technical standpoint. He also happens to run a nonprofit racing academy that has given opportunities to over 140 kids from communities that needed it most, Perry adds, letting the statement hang in the air. And from the video footage I just reviewed, you entered into a very clear wager with him, using very specific terms about the transfer of your company's shares. And you lost that wager decisively. Preston's mouth hangs open, then shuts, then opens once more. Not a single word emerges. Perry moves a little closer to Malcolm, lowering his voice for privacy. Mr. Travers, should you decide to pursue this matter through legal channels, I will gladly provide my body cam footage, the dash cam video you presented, and my own sworn testimony. I was a direct witness to the entire conversation. The terms of the bet were unmistakable, and both parties entered into it willingly. I appreciate that more than you know, Officer Perry. And for what it's worth, sir, Perry adds after a moment's hesitation, what you've done with that academy, giving those kids a real shot at something, that's bigger than any championship trophy. At least, in my book it is. Malcolm simply nods, not out of pride, but in quiet acknowledgement. Preston, however, steps forward, his voice cracking as anger and desperation boil over. You can't let this happen. I'll sue you. I'll sue both of you. I will bring a lawsuit against the entire police department. My legal team will bury you. You don't have a clue the kind of power I wield. Perry calmly holds up a hand. Mr. Whitmore, my advice to you is to get your lawyers on the phone, because from where I'm standing, you made a bet and you lost. And now it seems you owe this man your company. Anything beyond that is well above my pay grade. Preston's eyes dart between Perry, Malcolm, and the old Camaro with its faded paint job and the beast hidden within. His face is a canvas of shifting emotions, raw fury, utter disbelief, and cold calculation. Then, a chilling resolve settles over him. This is not over, he says, his voice low and steady. It's not even close. If you have ever been judged and dismissed based on the car you drive, the clothes you wear, or just the way you look, then you'll want to stay for this. Because this is where the story starts to hit close to home. March 15th, 2024, Malcolm dispatches a formal letter to Preston Whitmore III, demanding the complete transfer of all FinCorp shares as per their verbal contract on March 12th. The letter is impeccably polite, professionally written, and legally airtight, giving Preston 14 days to fulfill his end of the bargain. Preston doesn't bother to reply. Instead, on March 22nd, a very different kind of letter arrives for Malcolm, delivered in a thick envelope with an embossed return address. It's from the law firm of Cole Harrison and Associates, announcing a lawsuit filed against him in the Maricopa County Superior Court. They are seeking $10 million in damages. The plaintiff is listed as Preston Whitmore III, suing both as an individual and as the CEO of FinEdge Corp. The allegations include coercion, fraud, the intentional infliction of emotional distress, predatory targeting, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Malcolm sits in his kitchen reading the complaint, the coffee in his mug turning cold as he flips through page after shocking page. The wording is truly something to behold, not for its legal sharpness, but for its breathtakingly creative rewriting of what actually happened. It claimed, defendant Travers orchestrated a predatory scheme designed to manipulate the plaintiff into making statements that could then be deliberately misconstrued as a legally binding agreement. The lawsuit alleged fraud, claiming the defendant deliberately operated a vehicle engineered to appear unremarkable while hiding its actual high-performance capabilities. Essentially, Malcolm's supposed crime was driving a car that was much faster than it looked. The legal filing asserted the defendant's presence in the Ridgerest subdivision that day was no accident, but a calculated part of a plan to scout and exploit affluent residents. Stripped down, Malcolm's offense was navigating a public thoroughfare. Leading the charge was Harrison Cole himself, the firm's senior partner, billing at $800 an hour, with a client roster that was a veritable encyclopedia of Arizona's elite. He represented CEOs, politicians, and no fewer than two celebrities who had made disastrous choices that needed to be permanently erased. Harrison Cole didn't just win cases, he suffocated them, burying opponents in delays and expenses until they were forced to capitulate. The public relations offensive was launched within hours of the suit being filed. Sources connected to Preston Whitmore began feeding local reporters a narrative that cast Malcolm Travers as a professional grifter who used sleeper cars to ensnare the wealthy. By nightfall, the expression entrapment scheme had appeared in 3 different publications. Before the week concluded, cable news commentators were earnestly debating whether Malcolm ought to be criminally prosecuted. The story was being cemented in the public consciousness, and Malcolm was losing command of it entirely. In less than 7 days, Malcolm's life began to shrink in ways he could never have imagined, as 2 principal sponsors for the Travers Racing Academy rescinded their support. Both men belonged to the Ridgerest Country Club, and both cited vague, shifting organizational priorities with no further comment. Their combined funding accounted for 40% of the Academy's annual operating costs. A third benefactor, the owner of a local car dealership, phoned to say they were reevaluating the partnership. Malcolm knew exactly what that was code for. Every local attorney he contacted turned him down. The first 2 claimed scheduling impossibilities, while the third vaguely mentioned a potential conflict of interest. It was the 4th lawyer who, in a hushed tone over coffee, gave him the unvarnished truth. "I will not go against Harrison Cole. The man ends careers. It's not worth any price." Malcolm sat in his office at the Academy, the walls around him a mosaic of photographs, images of students on graduation day, pictures of them starting their first jobs, portraits of kids who'd grown up to be mechanics and engineers, including one who joined a NASCAR pit crew. Just outside his window, students maneuvered through drills on the practice track, the scream of engines and the cry of tires as they learned their own limits, oblivious to the impending crisis. They had no inkling that this place, the very program that gave them skills, hope, and a path away from the streets, was in jeopardy. That whole program could dissolve in 6 months if the financial backing continued to evaporate. Malcolm's phone vibrated. Another media inquiry. Another journalist wanting a statement on the so-called scheme. He let it ring. He understood from the start that this lawsuit was never designed to be won. Preston Whitmore had no need for $10 million. His net worth was $220 million. What he needed was confusion and delay, a chance to bury Malcolm under an avalanche of legal fees, motions, and depositions until the original wager became a forgotten footnote. This was the playbook of the powerful, the way men like Preston Whitmore had always conducted business. Their power came not from merit or righteousness, but from sheer attrition, from the cold, brutal fact that justice is a luxury item, and most can't cover the cost of entry. Malcolm picked up the phone and called his personal lawyer, Douglas, a man who expertly handled his tax returns and academy contracts, but had never faced a legal battle of this magnitude. "Doug, you need to find me somebody who isn't terrified of Harrison Cole." A heavy silence followed. "Malcolm, that's an exceptionally short list." "I don't care how short," Malcolm said. "Find them." He hung up and walked to the window, watching the students practice their turns, mastering the physics of weight transfer and grip, internalizing the discipline that high speed demands. His father's words echoed in his head. "You always finish what you start." Malcolm had never backed down from a fight in his life. Leaving Formula One didn't count. That was an exit on his own terms, not a retreat. He had never known surrender, never accepted a defeat that wasn't earned fair and square. He wasn't about to begin now. In the official court documents, Preston Whitmore III asserted that his words during the March 12th exchange were merely over-the-top joking and never constituted a formal offer. A press release was distributed by his attorney, Harrison Cole. Mr. Whitmore was the target of an elaborate con, conceived to extort financial gain through psychological pressure. The supposed bet was nothing but casual talk, deliberately taken out of context by a person demonstrating clear predatory behavior. We are certain the legal system will expose this charade and hold Mr. Travers responsible. Rachel Bennett had worked as a reporter for KTV's 12 for 11 years. Her beat was the city's dark underbelly, corruption, fraud, institutional failures, with the occasional human interest piece to cut through the bleakness. She had 2 regional Emmys to her name and a network of sources that ran from the police department and the courthouse to half the businesses in Phoenix. More importantly, she'd learned to trust her gut. And right now, her gut was screaming that the Malcolm Travers story was about more than just a wager. The lead came in as an anonymous email from someone inside Ridgerest Country Club, though she hadn't yet identified the employee. The message was stark and simple. Preston Whitmore had a history of this. Pull the security tapes. Find out about the others. The others. That phrase hung in the air when Rachel sat down with Malcolm at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix. A neutral ground for them both. He came with his laptop. She came with a legal pad and a recorder, watching the dash cam footage twice while scribbling notes and pausing to get the quotes just right. When the video ended, she looked up at him. "This is airtight," she said. He uttered the words. He proposed the bet. He raced, and he lost. But to defeat Harrison Cole in a courtroom, you'll need something beyond airtight. You need it to be crushing. You need to show a pattern. You need to establish context. So, what do you require from me? Access, your full cooperation, and your patience. An investigation like this can't be rushed. If I hurry and make a single mistake, Cole will bury me right alongside you. Malcolm simply nodded. You have all 3. And with that, Rachel started her deep dive. Her first breakthrough came from the anonymous tipper who revealed himself to be James Holloway, the security guard that had witnessed the whole thing from his booth. At first, James only agreed to an off-the-record chat at a diner out by the airport. But after Rachel laid out what she was digging for and why, he consented to an official interview. And then came the crucial part. He agreed to give her something priceless: access to the country club's complete security camera archives. What Rachel discovered in those archives wasn't just an incident. It was a clear, documented, and absolutely undeniable pattern of behavior. 5 separate incidents over 2 years, every single one of them involving Preston Whitmore III, and every single one involving a person of color. In March of 2022, Preston confronted a black physician in the club's parking lot whose perfectly respectable Honda Accord apparently wasn't flashy enough. Preston's words were caught on tape. "What kind of physician drives a car meant for the poor? Are you certain you're at the correct club?" The doctor lodged a formal complaint with the club's manager. The result was nothing. No inquiry, no repercussions. August 2022. Preston confronted a black family that was touring a house for sale near the club, accompanied by their licensed real estate agent. He strode across his lawn, interrupted the viewing, and declared, "This area has certain standards. Are you positive you can uphold them?" The family walked away from the house. Then, in January of 2023, Preston cornered a black college student who was just driving through the area. The young man, a senior at Arizona State, was on his way to visit a friend who lived right there. Using his Lamborghini, Preston blocked the student's car, walked up to the window and demanded, "So are you lost, or are you scouting houses to rob?" The student reported the incident to the police, but the report vanished into thin air. June 2023. Preston sicked the police on a black electrician who was doing fully permitted work at the home of another club member. The electrician had his work permit, the homeowner's direct permission, and a company truck with the logo plastered all over it. Despite all that, he was held for 45 minutes as the officers confirmed his story. No charges were filed, and no apology was offered. Then came March of 2024, when Preston confronted Malcolm Travers. The pattern was glaring. The way he chose his targets was impossible to miss. But Rachel knew she needed more voices. She tracked down 3 more witnesses, all people of color, And all of them told stories about Preston Whitmore that mirrored each other with an eerie, unmistakable similarity. He told me my car was junk, one man, a middle-aged accountant, recounted. Then he had the nerve to ask if I'd stolen it. I was just there to pick up my daughter from a birthday party. He called my house that junk property during an HOA meeting, another witness shared. This from a woman who owned her home in a neighborhood right next to the club, and he said it in a room full of 30 people. I've been living there for 12 years. He called my lawn equipment junk and demanded to see if I had a permit to be working here, said the third man, a landscaper. I was at my own house, trimming my own lawn, in my own neighborhood. That word, junk, appeared again and again. It was a code, a weapon, a method for telling someone they didn't belong without ever having to say the words. Rachel then got her hands on an internal email Preston had sent to the Ridgerest Country Club board in January of 2024. The subject line read, "Urgent Community Standards." The email continued, "We must get more aggressive about ensuring the wrong kind of people are kept out. Let's begin with the parking lot. If they're driving junk, it's a safe bet they shouldn't be here. Our membership pays a steep price for the benefit of exclusivity. It's our duty to safeguard that benefit. If they drive junk, they probably don't belong." James Holloway finally agreed to speak on camera. His face was tight with nerves, but his voice was unwavering. "I've been employed there for 7 years. Every single incident that I ever reported concerning every single time, Whitmore's target was a person of color. And his excuse was always the car, calling it a piece of junk, a welfare ride, a suspicious vehicle. That was his signature move, his opening gambit. On April 15th, Rachel's 3-part expose goes live. The first installment lays out Malcolm's ordeal. The second uncovers the disturbing pattern. The third brings the receipts, witnesses, emails, and damning security footage. In less than 48 hours, the series explodes online, racking up over 2 million views. The story ignites a firestorm, with national outlets amplifying it. Suddenly, junk car racism becomes part of the national conversation, and the court of public opinion turns on a dime. But then, something completely unexpected happens. A secret, buried for 41 years, is about to surface because of what Harold Gibson knows. It's a secret that links Malcolm Travers and Preston Whitmore in a way neither of them could have ever conceived. Harold Gibson's voice may be frail, weathered by age, but his mind is a steel trap. 78 years haven't managed to blur the edges of his memory. "Mr. Travers, I saw you on the news. I knew your father, Samuel. We both worked over at the Ridgerest Country Club way back in the 80s. There's a short silence, the sound of a man dredging up painful history. "Did he ever mention that place to you?" Malcolm's knuckles go white as he clutches the phone. "My father never once said a word about that club. Not in my entire life." "I didn't think so," Harold sighs. "He was a mechanic there from 1979 to 1983. And he was the best they ever had. The man could tell you what was wrong with an engine just from the sound of its idle. The club members all loved him, always asked for him by name. So what happened? They fired him. September 1983. Claimed he was stealing car parts, expensive stuff, catalytic converters, alternators, top-shelf components. The thing is, he never stole a damn thing. It just wasn't in him. A heavy silence hangs in the air, and the only thing Malcolm can hear is the frantic pounding in his own chest. Harold keeps talking. It was Preston Whitmore's father, Preston II. He was the club president at the time. Some inventory had vanished, a real theft, mind you, and they never found who did it. But instead of doing a real investigation, they just needed someone to pin it on, a fall guy to make the rich members feel secure again. Your father was the easy choice. He was convenient because he was black, quiet, and didn't have any powerful connections. No family with deep pockets or lawyers on call. There was nobody to stand up for him. Malcolm's jaw clenches so hard it aches. His father carried this for 52 years and never said a word, not even on his deathbed. Never. Why didn't he fight it? He had a son, Harold says, his voice gentling, an 11-year-old son. That was you. He couldn't bear the thought of you watching the world destroy him, watching men with more money and better lawyers tear him down. He didn't want you to find out so young that the game was rigged against people like us. So he just walked away, took a job at some downtown dealership and buried it. Never mentioned the club, the Whitmores, or what happened ever again. Harold explains he still has the old paperwork, a copy of the termination notice he saved when he tried to help Samuel file a formal complaint. It was a complaint that was dead on arrival, smothered by high-priced lawyers and a wall of silence. Employee Samuel James Travers. Employee ID number 152. Terminated September 14th, 1983. Reason for termination: theft of club property. Authorized by Preston Whitmore II, club president. 2 generations of Whitmores and 2 generations of the Travers family. The same country club, the same kind of lies, the exact same pattern of destruction. In 1983, Preston Whitmore II ruined Samuel Travers' life with a lie. Now in 2024, his son tries to do the same thing to Malcolm Travers with a lawsuit. Later that night, Malcolm is sitting alone in his garage. The Camaro sits in its usual spot, his father's car. The very same car Samuel had to drive home on the day he was fired 41 years ago. It was the one thing he kept running, kept polished, the one thing he passed down because it was a symbol of the dignity they tried to strip from him. Malcolm never understood, but now he does. This was never about $220 million. This is about justice, about finishing a fight his father was never allowed to start. At first, the public support is just a trickle, but within a week, that trickle becomes a tidal wave. The hashtag Malcolm Deserves Paid starts trending nationwide, exploding with 200,000 tweets in just 72 hours. The whole ordeal has morphed into a symbol of unchecked arrogance and the simple, powerful idea that some debts demand to be paid. The Formula One world is the first to weigh in. A former rival posts a message online. Malcolm Travers was the cleanest and quickest driver of his era. If he says a bet was made, then a bet was made. Then a former teammate chimes in. I've known Malcolm for 30 years. The man doesn't lie, and he sure as hell doesn't throw races. Simple as that. Even a current driver gets involved. He tweets, "That so-called junk car would leave half the vehicles in my garage in the dust. Malcolm built it with his own 2 hands. A GoFundMe set up for his legal defense skyrockets to $420,000 in under 60 hours. And that's when Gloria Hayes enters the picture. She's 55 years old, with 3 decades of experience in civil rights law. More importantly, she has 6 wins against Harrison Cole himself. She sits in Malcolm's kitchen and watches the dashcam video. When the footage ends, she looks directly at Malcolm. In my entire career, this is one of the most straightforward verbal contracts I have ever witnessed. Her words are precise. Outrun me with that junk car, and I'll sign over every single share. That's the offer. Deal. That's the acceptance. And the race itself? That's the consideration. Under Arizona law, that promise is ironclad. Harrison Cole tries to dismiss it as just big talk. But then again, his job is to spin whatever narrative his clients pay for. Gloria can't help but smile. The real question is if a judge will buy that excuse. And she's certain they never will. Her secret weapon is Victor Sandoval, an expert witness and contract law professor from Arizona State. He makes the case simple. In Arizona, a spoken promise becomes a locked-in deal when 4 specific things happen. First, an offer was made. Second, it was accepted. Third, something of value was at stake. And fourth, both sides clearly intended to make a deal. The dashcam video proves all 4 of those points without a shadow of a doubt. Mr. Whitmore owes Mr. Travers an entire company, and Gloria immediately files for a fast-tracked arbitration. This move bypasses a jury trial and dodges years of legal stonewalling. One arbitrator will deliver a final, unappealable ruling in under 30 days. Harrison Cole pushes back hard against the motion. He's desperate for delays, for endless discovery requests. He wants to drag this through the molasses-slow machinery of the courts. The arbitrator shuts down Cole's request flat. The hearing is set for May 28, 2024, giving Preston Whitmore just 23 days to somehow escape the trap he set for himself. May 28, 2024, 10 o'clock in the morning. The scene is a conference room at the Phoenix Arbitration Center, all oak panels and the cold hum of fluorescent lights. On one side of the table sits Malcolm, flanked by Gloria Hayes and Victor Sandoval. Malcolm is dressed in an understated gray suit, the only notable detail being his father's watch on his wrist. Across from them, Preston is surrounded by Harrison Cole and a team of 4 junior associates. Preston's suit alone costs more than the average car, and his fingers betray his anxiety with a restless drumming on the tabletop. Presiding over the hearing is the Honorable Margaret Sullivan, who brings 25 years of experience from the bench and an absolute intolerance for courtroom drama. Gloria opens the proceedings. This case, she begins, is incredibly straightforward. A man made a wager, he lost that wager, and now he's refusing to honor his word. We are here to ensure he does. The dashcam video lights up a large screen, and a hush falls over the room as Preston's own voice echoes through the speakers. "Beat my car with that piece of junk, I dare you," the recording plays. "You managed to outrun me in that thing, and I will sign over every last share of FinEdge Corp." Victor Sandoval then takes the floor to present his professional analysis. He breaks it down. The 4 required elements for a contract were all clearly there, and every single one was documented. Officer Perry's sworn affidavit is then read aloud, stating, "I was there right after it happened. Mr. Whitmore was fully aware that he had lost a bet. The way he's trying to get out of it now is textbook behavior for someone who knows they have a debt to pay." Harrison Cole gets to his feet. "This was a joke," he argues. "It was nothing more than empty boasting. No sensible person would have taken the phrase, 'I'll sign over every share,' as a literal offer." Gloria's rebuttal comes without a moment's hesitation. When a person says, "I'll give you $1 million," and then follows through by taking part in the stated challenge, in this instance a race, it stops being just talk. Mr. Whitmore climbed into his car, and he competed. He acted on the offer. That action transformed it into a binding contract. Harrison Cole turns his attention to the arbitrator. "The press coverage has poisoned the well, creating a cloud of bias against my client." Mr. Whitmore's words were twisted and taken out of context. "Our position remains firm. No legally binding agreement ever existed." Judge Sullivan directs her gaze straight at Preston. "Mr. Whitmore, did you or did you not say the words, 'Outrun me with that junk car, and I'll sign over every single share of FinEdge Corp'?" Preston's attorney begins to stand and object, but Sullivan cuts him off with a single, sharp look. "Just answer the question." Yes, but what I meant was, and did you subsequently engage in a race with Mr. Travers?" "Yes, but," "And were you defeated in that race?" A long silence hangs in the air. "Yes." Judge Sullivan glances down, briefly reviewing her notes. Then she looks back up at them. The video evidence leaves no room for interpretation. Mr. Whitmore presented a very clear offer. Mr. Travers accepted that offer. Both men followed through on the terms. Mr. Travers was the victor. According to the contract laws of Arizona, this constitutes a legitimate and enforceable verbal agreement. She lets the words hang in the air for a moment. Mr. Whitmore is therefore ordered to transfer 100% of his shares in FinEdge Corp. over to Mr. Travers inside of the next 7 calendar days. The color drains completely from Preston's face. Harrison Cole snaps his folder shut, deliberately avoiding eye contact with his client. The atmosphere is thick with defeat. A week later, on June 4th, 2024, they gather in Gloria Hayes' conference room. Preston is seated opposite Malcolm, a stock transfer agreement lying on the table between them. A noticeable tremor runs through Preston's hand as he signs his name. He shoves the document across the table, rises from his chair without a word, and exits the room, never once glancing back. Malcolm takes the document, studies the signature for a moment, then folds it with precision and tucks it into the inside pocket of his jacket. "You called my car a piece of junk," Malcolm says quietly to the now empty doorway. "And now it owns your entire company." 6 months pass. On December 4th, 2024, FinEdge Corp is officially gone. In its place is a new entity, Travers Ventures. Malcolm sold off 60% of the company to a select group of investors who met his stringent ethical standards. The remaining 40% throws off enough cash to finance his true passion, to the tune of $100 million. That is the exact amount Malcolm transferred into the endowment fund for the Travers Racing Academy. It's enough capital to keep it running for 200 years. The academy expands to 5 new cities: Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles, serving 800 students, with every single one of them on a full scholarship. As for Preston Whitmore III, he was forced to file for bankruptcy just 3 months after signing away his company. His Scottsdale mansion went for $4.2 million. The Lamborghini was also sold, ironically, to a graduate from the very first class of the Racing Academy. These days, Preston is living in a guest room at his brother's house in Ohio. Back in Phoenix, whenever he tries to call his old business contacts, the calls are never returned. Rachel's investigation gutted the club, with its membership plummeting by 45%. New rules were put in place, making it illegal to profile people based on their car or how wealthy they appeared. As for Officer Daniel Perry, he was given a promotion to sergeant. He's an instructor at the police academy now, teaching a course called Doing the Right Thing When No One's Watching. For her work, Rachel Bennett took home a regional Emmy and even passed on a national network gig to remain in Phoenix. James Holloway, meanwhile, landed a new job as the head of security at the Travers Racing Academy. 6 o'clock in the morning, inside the garage. The Camaro is sitting right where it always is. The paint is just as faded, the leather just as cracked, and under the hood is the very same engine his father helped him put together. A student, just 16 years old, walks over. "Mr. Travers, you could have literally any car you want now, like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. So why do you stick with this old Camaro?" Malcolm places his hand on the hood, the metal cool beneath his touch. This car taught a millionaire a lesson worth $220 million. It showed him that junk is just a word used by people who are blind to true value. He swings open the driver's side door, and it reinforced what my father always told me. Don't waste your breath explaining who you are. Let your actions show them. The engine rumbles to life. The deep V8 growl fills the entire garage. I figure this car has more than earned its spot. Don't you dare outrun me with that piece of junk. Preston Whitmore threw those words out as an insult. Malcolm Travers used them to cash a $220 million check. Never judge a car by a faded paint job. Never judge a man by the clothes on his back. And never, ever wager what you can't stand to lose. If anyone has ever labeled you as junk, this story is for you. If you've ever been completely overlooked, then this one's for you. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and share. 5 simple words can cost you everything you have, or they can win you the entire pot. It all just depends on which side of that wager you are on.